Hey everybody, Madison here with Health by Ratio. We are an online group of functional movement coaches, corrective exercise specialists, licensed physical therapists, functional health coaches that work very holistically with all of our clients in not only recovering from recurring injuries and chronic pains, but also reconditioning their bodies back to full ranges of stable motion so that they can pursue their fitness and health goals, whether those goals are pertaining to athletics and sports or whether it's just general daily life and wanting to be able to hike and walk with the dogs and enjoy playing with the kids and grandkids, whatever it is. We help people with getting to their functional health goals. And like I said, we work all online. And one of the most common questions that we often cover, and by the way, we got a beautiful bird that's chirping outside. So if I'm getting a little bit of background noise, I apologize. It's spring weather, and I got to be outside right now. So anyway, the common question that I get from both clients that we work with, as well as a lot of the consultation calls that we do to help our people that are connecting with us for free in understanding what's going on with their body, what's linking to their injuries, what's causing them, is how to recover the quickest. And one of the most common things is, should I ice or should I heat or should I do both? And this is a massively important question, in my opinion, and a very somewhat controversial topic right now. As a matter of fact, one of our current clients right now is just like, hey, I know you've been talking about this a lot, and my chiropractor is telling me I really should be icing. I like this is they say this is what helps with inflammation, and heat doesn't help with that. Okay, so before I get into my understanding and the research that I have done on this, I am going to read you guys a quote verbatim from somebody who's fairly important and fairly knowledgeable on the whole RICE protocol, which we all know that acronym. That's the rest, ice, compress, elevate. We all know that when you get hurt, that's what you're supposed to do. Well, the guy who created that was a man named Dr. Gabe Mirkin. I believe he was a Harvard physician, yes. I don't believe he's still practicing. I could be wrong on that. But back in 1978, Dr. Gabe Mirkin coined that term, and he was the one who really made this thing famous, this whole RICE protocol. Well, this is an excerpt of a foreword that he wrote for a groundbreaking book that's titled Iced, the Illusionary Treatment Option. And in this foreword, the quote that Dr. Gabe Mirkin, this came out in 2013, the quote that he actually wrote in the foreword was, "Subsequent research shows that ice can actually delay recovery." Let me say that again. Subsequent research shows that ice can actually delay recovery. Mild movement helps tissue to heal faster, and the application of cold suppresses the immune response that start and hasten recovery. Icing does help suppress pain, but athletes are usually far more interested in returning as quickly as possible to the playing field. So today, RICE is not the preferred treatment for acute athletic injury. Okay, that was from the guy who created, or coined, I should say, started the term RICE that so many of us follow. And if you go into like 95% plus of clinics, trainers' offices, Google what to do when you roll an ankle or whatever, the first thing that we are told is ice it. Throw some ice on that thing. That is because information disseminates very, very slowly. This came out in 2013. That's 8 years ago. Still, so many practitioners think that ice is a great thing to do when it comes to inflammation. Look, I felt like it was just until a last handful of years. I threw ice on everything all the time. I recommended it. Like, I lived and died on ice. My knees are sore, I threw ice on it. I rolled an ankle, ice on it. If I had a neck tweak, ice on it. I just always was throwing ice on it. It was what I grew up to do. That's what you learn when you get hurt. And then I started doing some research, and some things started coming out in the last 10 or so years that was saying, you know what, this whole concept of icing might not be helping us heal the way we think it is. And logically, it kind of makes sense. Once I started reading up on this, I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So if we think about it, the things when we get hurt, that means we damage tissue, right? And the only way for us to heal that damaged tissue is we need nutrients to get to that tissue so it can repair. Well, what carries those nutrients? It's our blood. Our blood carries those nutrients to that damaged tissue. So if we want, in theory, blood to go to an area to heal, that's why we have an inflammatory response. You roll your ankle and it balloons up. That's because your body's sending a ton of blood flow to that area so that it can repair faster. It's actually like, it's not a bad thing to be inflamed during that moment. You want that inflammation. That means your body's prioritizing getting blood and nutrients to that area so it can repair ASAP. But when we ice an area, what happens is we basically temporarily freeze the capillaries that are taking that blood out of the big circulation. So our heart's pumping blood through its big channels that's circulating blood throughout our body. But the little delta inlets, the little nooks and crannies of the tissues that need the nutrients to heal have these capillaries that pull the blood out of that circulation and absorb it into the sponge of the tissue. But if we froze those guys, if we restricted them and they don't function very well, well then guess what doesn't get absorbed very well into those damaged tissues? It's the blood. So when we ice an area, the benefit, like Dr. Gabe Mirkin pointed out, is that it helps it feel better in the moment, right? We numb the area out. It doesn't hurt as bad. We got a nerve that's flared up. It calms it down. We have the area is throbbing with pain. Well, like that icing in the moment hurts, but it numbs it out for the next hour or so. It's not as painful afterwards. So it tricks us into thinking we did some good work, but really we just numbed it. It's like we took a painkiller. That didn't necessarily heal us, but that did distract us from the pain for a period of time. So it helps us feel better in the moment, but it restricts our body's ability to get the right nutrients to the damaged tissues and help them repair faster. So with most of our clients, unless they have something that's really flared up and they need relief in the moment, like an example that my team and I use regularly is if the person has like a flared up nerve like crazy, and the only way that nerve is going to feel better is if they do certain releases or certain nerve glides or certain stretches or even certain movements to help that thing function better. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if that nerve calms down, because it's flared up too much in that moment. We're not even able to move even if we want to. We can't do that trigger point. We can't do that nerve glide. It's too pissed off at us. So that's when icing can be a great tool, because it can calm down the area, it can numb it out a little bit, then we can do the protocols around that nerve to get it a little bit more functional, and then it feels better as that icing wears off kind of thing. So there is a purpose to the tool still, but it does delay recovery of acute injuries, damaged tissue. It doesn't help the blood flow. So it might help us feel better in the moment, but it delays our body's ability to heal. So in general, heat is the preferred treatment option to help with recovery, because that helps with throwing some extra blood flow and nutrients to it. Now, that obviously depends on the injury. Like if you just rolled your ankle and it's ballooned up to the size of a grapefruit, and then you throw a heat pack on it, that's going to make it throb and hurt. That thing already has enough blood flow to it. You don't need to be throwing more heat into the area. It's got enough energy in that thing. So you got to gauge it. Like if it's now a few days removed from the area, from the injury, I should say, then yeah, start to throw in some heat. Now, if it starts to get uncomfortable, back off. Take that thing off. But like Dr. Gabe Mirkin was saying in that quote that I read at the start of this, movement is ultimately the thing that helps recover from the injury the fastest. Why? Because when we move, that creates blood flow. Like we all know this. We know this from Arnold. Like his whole "I'm going to pump you up," that funny statement. Well, when you exercise an area, what happens is you pump blood to the tissue that you're exercising. Well, just moving creates blood flow. So by moving the area, we end up creating extra blood flow to it. It also helps turn on our lymphatic system. Our lymphatic system is what actually drains inflammation out of our body. And the lymphatic system is passive. It doesn't work if we don't move. So meaning if I just sit here, my lymphatic system isn't doing anything. But as I move the body, the muscle movement under, because the lymphatic system is very surface, the tissue that are moving under it end up helping inflammation flush out of that and get to our lymph nodes and get back into our circulation. So movement is what actually gets the good blood flow and helps us drain inflammation out of it. And then the other components of RICE, that acronym, not the icing, but and also not necessarily the resting, because we want, it's relative rest, right? But we do want movement to the area. We don't want to lock it in place and rest it that way. We just want gentle movement that could be considered rest in comparison to like throwing a ball, but that doesn't mean that we're completely resting and not moving this thing. We are moving this thing into non-painful ranges of motion, so to speak. But the other aspects of it, of compression and elevation, can also aid in reducing inflammation that is getting too chronic. Like I said, inflammation isn't a bad response when you get an injury. You want that response. You want that extra blood flow. We just don't want it to pool there. We don't want it to sit forever. We want to be able to drain it and then let the body pump new nutrients to it, and then drain it and then pump new nutrients to it. So elevation and compression throughout our day after an acute injury can help aid in that. Gentle movements can help aid in that. Like if I have a swollen ankle, I don't have to be doing like crazy movements with my ankle, but just doing a little bit of dorsiflexion and plantar flexion to whatever's comfortable, or doing a little bit of inversion or eversion if I can tolerate that. Just doing little minor movements to it, maybe extending and bending the knee so I get the large leg muscle to function. That is what helps us actually drain inflammation. Icing, not necessarily the thing that's helping us heal right there. So now, this topic is still highly debatable, and most clinicians, most trainers, most practitioners in the health space are still under the presumption that icing is great. So when you talk to people, it's going like this is information disseminates slowly. Not too many of us graduate from our school or our schooling and go pick up old textbooks and read new editions and see where the updates are. And not too many are actively going out and searching for new research that comes out. We learn what we learned 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and that's what we live and die by. And there's a lot of great information that has been there from 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but things get updated. And one of those happens to be icing isn't necessarily helping us out. Like I said, Dr. Gabe Mirkin, the creator of RICE, he himself wrote it in that book. And I'm going to attach a link into the base of this video. That's a great article that refers to that forward, but also gives you some more research and rundown of how icing impacts the body. And you guys can take a look for yourself. Read it yourself. Share it with your practitioners. I want this information out to everybody so that we stop doing this treatment over and over and over again for everybody. There's a time and a place for it. Like we talked about that example of a nerve flaring up. That doesn't mean that we need to do it all day, every day. So that would be some good, useful information to spread the word to everybody that is icing regularly and using a go-to. Throw some heat on it. Get some movement to it. Now, if you guys want some help with what are some safe movements for you to do that moves the body and helps this inflammation get down and helps you get some good nutrients to it in a safe way that's not going to irritate those areas further, and or want to understand how to recondition your body back to full ranges of stable motion so that you're not doing the movements that irritated the injury in the first place or the movements that have now come from the compensations from the injury. That's what we do, and we do it for free. And so we have an offer that we give to everybody, which is 2 free consultation calls. The first one is us getting the information on you, what your background is, what your goals are, what your body's been through, all that kind of stuff. And then we do another follow-up call where you and I connect over video. We go through a number of movement assessments and range of motion tests, and we see not only how your body's moving, but why it's moving the way that it is. And then we create a game plan together on what mobilizations you can do, what exercise and movements you should be doing to help recondition this thing back to full range of stable motion. So if you're interested, we'll attach a link to our calendar where you can book your free call. And outside of that, guys, hope you have a great rest of your day.